This podcast is made possible in part by the Kent County Medical Society Alliance.
Welcome to the Be Nice podcast, where we have conversations surrounding, understanding, recognizing, taking action when it comes to mental health, mental illnesses, mental health disorders. I'm Christy Buck, your host. Be Nice is a simple action plan. Notice, invite, challenge, empower. 4 steps that could potentially change, improve, and save lives. Our guest in this episode is former Detroit Lions quarterback Eric Hipple, one of my very good friends, and a longtime mental health advocate in and around the entire nation and actually international. Today, I'm going to invite you to understand and recognize, again, like we always do, busting a myth. So today's myth, and we're going to have Eric help me unravel this myth, and the myth is surrounding Be Nice and the Be Nice action plan. So the myth today is that it's a bully prevention program. So obviously, when we say the word Be Nice, we assume that, this program would focus on kids being nice to each other. So when we are out and about in the community, we are trying and working on educating people that this is more than that. It is an action plan to be used for everyone. It's an action plan to notice, invite, challenge, and empower. So today, one of our biggest advocates is Eric Hipple, and Eric is going to help me to help you understand what the Be Nice action plan is. So welcome, Eric. First and foremost, I want to thank you for coming over today. His home base is obviously in the Detroit area, and we're doing this in Grand Rapids. So Eric, tell me, I already know this, but we're going to be telling our listeners today on our podcast how you first became involved with the Mental Health Foundation of West Michigan and Be Nice.
So I can probably cut to half of my story to get there, right?
Yeah.
So at the time, I was actually working on schools as far as I knew I could get into see coaches, So suicide prevention is for the main theme I was working on at the time, and how to educate and how to connect, and really it's just about depression and suicide prevention is what I was working on. And so there's a small foundation that was out there that had enough money to do maybe 10, 15 schools a year. So we would put it out there in an email, and whoever picks up on it, and usually it's after something has happened. Mm-hmm. So then, I'd go in and talk, do an assembly, or go in and talk to the coaching staff or something like that, right? So as that grew, and we went around and started getting into more and more schools, and I see the demand is much bigger than that. And at the same time, I also realized we are really not very good at any follow-up. So we can go in and talk and say, here's our program, or not really. We didn't have a program. Here's some information, and I would tell it in an intriguing way, and with football as a background, I could hold your attention and at least make a dent. Hopefully,
yep.
At least be aware, because that's one thing I was growing up. Plus, even before all the stuff that happened, I had no idea what mental health really was, right? And so, if nothing else, let's just give you a footprint, at least a little bit of information, a seed, about mental health, and so you'll be aware of it. So we were stigma busting is what we're trying to do.
Yep.
Well, the more, where I went around and looked around, and all of a sudden, I met you over on this side of the town.
Yep.
At a conference, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And we started talking. I thought you were pretty intriguing, and so we followed up a little bit more, and then you invited me over to do I forget what it was, but I just remember it was like a festival, right?
A rally.
It was a rally, that's what it was, right? And you were doing Live, Laugh, and Love at that time.
Yep, we were doing education.
Yeah. And so, so I started following you about that time, and I was over there doing my thing, and you're doing yours. But what I noticed is, when you got onto Be Nice, which I really love, by the way. See, I even got my shirt on.
I know it. You're the best.
Yeah. Because, it's like one of those things where it's a very simple statement. That means, be nice. Mm-hmm. I mean, that can go a bunch of different ways. It's not bad, to be nice, right? But then, how deep does it go? And what you had, though, was the student involvement. You also had, so it's a program, so it's not just, here's a one thing and I can just come in and do it one time. So what eventually happened was as I watched you, propel and go and get more schools and saw what was happening, where students are actually, involved in the program.
Huge piece.
And at the same time, there's all these other programs. There's You Matter. There was these other programs. There's Yellow Ribbon. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different programs that have been out there. And but I kind of liked yours for the simplicity of it, but also the depth it can go, and the amount of information and the portal that you had and everything else. So eventually, I just said, you know what? And I told the people that I was getting my small grant from. I said, what we're doing is not good, and I'll say it's good for the day, but it doesn't hold. And 20 days later, they forget anything that I said, and so. Maybe if somebody's in need for that day, they might get some information. But we really need something more than that. And so I introduced them to you, or you to them.
Yep.
I'm not sure how exactly it went.
Yep.
But and got them to kind of say, hey, listen. So I kind of released myself from it. And we moved the grant over to Be Nice, and with the saying, well, we're going to put 10 schools on in Oakland County. And so we kind of sold them on that, and unfortunately, we let them pick the schools. I'm jokingly saying that because they wanted the schools they wanted because it was by some sort of affiliation they had, instead of just in need. And so that's a little hump to get over with, but we did, and we brought it over. We did a kickoff. We started putting schools on, and at that time, I was just kind of sitting back and watching. And I'm not involved in training. I just kind of good. We do this, and then you can use me for the assembly. I'm pretty decent at that, and we'll do that. But I just watched the weight grow and watched the student involvement. There was a time and place where I was actually doing peer-to-peer work with like Grand Blanc High School and some other schools that had a student club or something where I'd go in and do that. And I was doing that just for fun because it's engaging. And eventually that peer-to-peer thing turned into the peer-to-peer thing that we have for Detroit Lions.
Yeah.
And so I was able to use that. But what I saw was the students and how engaged they were and really kind of how smart they are.
Yep.
And what they know kind of what they need. They just don't know how to put it together.
Yeah.
And so that's what you were presiding at the time. So
I know, and
thought it
I
was great.
love that you recognize that because, those are hard conversations to have sometimes with other folks. And now you make it easy that the one and dones are great, right? Or the assemblies.
And
ultimately,
they can be motivational. They're really good for the day.
Exactly.
It's like, let's do it on a Thursday or Friday before the game's coming up or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You can really be motivational that way and have a really impact. Because quite frankly, people, their memories, it sticks when there's an emotional involvement to it, right?
Yeah.
That's why trauma can be so bad sometimes because such an emotional involvement to it. But on the other side, if you do something really motivational, they can remember it, something to remember. And so that's, again, goes into the Be Nice thing. There's something they can remember instead of trying some complex, long, anagram or something that makes sense.
I remember the first time, because I was coming and watching you, you were going to be at one of our Be Nice schools doing your presentation. And I remember saying, can we just add the Be Nice action plan in somehow? And we had such a great conversation then. And you had, you did lay a foundation, you did, in the state of Michigan, to have these further conversations with individuals. And I appreciate that you're recognizing the action plan as something that can be that thing that creates that conversation. So at the beginning of your journey, and I know your story, and it's interesting because you have a journey of losing a loved one to suicide. And oftentimes that is what people are looking for, is that story, that sensational, that story. How'd you get through that, Eric? And what you did was you turned your story into more of a story of how do we take and save lives through resiliency, mental fitness. And for us in the Be Nice Action Plan, which I know it's your favorite step, is the E, empowerment. Tell me that journey from that start of losing a loved one to now where you are.
Sure, and I'll even go back further than that because for me growing up, my mom had, I didn't know what to call it, but my dad would say it's one of her spells.
The famous. Yep.
So she had depression when we were growing up, and then I was kind of a shy kid. You wouldn't know it today, but I was, and so I wasn't always comfortable around a lot of people and stuff. And so when as I got a little bit older and started getting to high school, and it's funny you talk about the bullying piece. I remember like in 5th and 6th grade, there was a kid that was in grade with us that used to want to fight me every day. Hey, we're going to fight after school. Oh, so the whole day in school, I'm thinking, this guy's going to fight. And all the people are all ramped up.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what I learned that day. And just before the school over was, no, you've been pretty good. I'm not going to let you, I'm going to let you off the hook. I'm going, by all psych up time. So anyway, that went for quite a while. And I found out, looking back, that his father was a policeman. And so his father was really, really rough, sergeant type,
Yeah.
And I think it was trickled down to him, and he took it out on me. So anyway,
Looking back.
there's always something there, right?
Yeah.
It's that people just don't go out and bully for what they like. There's usually some sort of story behind
Yeah.
there. But anyway, so as I grew up and dealt with that, found success in football, belonged to something. Went on from high school, got a scholarship, so went to college. And in college, I had I would say my first major bout of depression, which is I just didn't go to school. I just didn't feel right, didn't feel good, and so I just stayed in bed. And that's the great thing about college is somebody bothers you if that's what you're going to do, But after a while, when all of a sudden my grades tanked and I wasn't eligible to play football, and the coaches came running and said, "Hey, what are you doing? We got to get you eligible." Went to summer school, got my grades back up, but nobody ever asked me what was wrong. Why weren't you going to school? What was happening?
Yep.
Or dug any deeper. And so I let it go. I guess part of life. So anyway, that went on. And I got drafted by the Detroit Lions. Awesome. So I've got this, memories of like big peaks, and big valleys, and that was certainly a huge peak.
Yeah.
Became the starter my second year in the league. And it was fantastic. So I'm the starting quarterback and all this stuff's going great. I started for 4 or 5 years, I think, going into 87, I broke my hand in training camp, so I was on IR, injury reserve, so came back in the following year, and then midway through, I got my starting job back against San Francisco, broke my ankle, so I'm out on that. So and we talk about these transitions, going up a high, and all of a sudden now you're came back in 89 and said, all right, okay, we had a new coaching change again. I came in all revved up, and got my starting job back about halfway through the season against Minnesota, and I just had a terrible game. I was so in my head about proving a point rather than go and play the game that it got away from me. And I threw a couple of interceptions for touchdowns. I was getting sacked a lot, couldn't get out of the way, and finally they pulled me in the third quarter, and then they cut me the next day. So I guess my journey, to these ups and downs and stuff, I've always been resilient. Resilience to me was, you get knocked down. It's a physical thing. Get knocked down, you get back up again. Wow, he's a tough guy.
Yeah.
And so I never really had it emotionally. This was a really tough time. And I'd gone through divorce. And so at this point in time, what do I do? Took some time off. My girlfriend became my fiance, then became my wife, and started a business. And then about 5 years in that business, it happened again, this feeling. And it was then where I started proudly self-medicating a lot, just to try and keep going. And it's always worked in the past, so this time it wasn't working the same way. And what happened is I just all of a sudden, that mindset where I just feel like I'm in the way, I'm not worthy, I don't like myself, so how can my family like me? And I ended up, my wife was driving to the airport to take a trip out of town. And I just wrote her a note, said, "I love you," and I jumped out of the car. So, I hit the pavement at 75 miles an hour and woke up in the hospital. They'd already done surgery on me, so I got very lucky I didn't get run over or hit. And I don't even know if that's the motivation was to take my life or not. It was just, get out of here. Yeah. Here's this, and I'm out. You're better off without me. And but, I still didn't learn anything because I was so stigmatized about, putting that behind me. Don't be that guy. Don't be the loser. Get away from it. So I didn't take any help from a psychiatrist or nobody else. So what ended up happening in this, where, we start getting into why I think a program is important or to have something around, is my son Jeff, when he was 15, he got on the other side of the holidays that year. And he had been going back and forth between myself and my ex-wife, who lived in Utah. And so, every situation was there for him to be going through transitions like I had gone through, but I couldn't see it. So he ended up taking his life. It was a Saturday morning when I said goodbye to him and took a trip over to Vancouver for business. And I got the phone call the next day, and he died. So when I came back, this is really strange, but when I came back, I'd always kind of tricked around in my head about, well, you can always, suicide. I think I'm going to kill myself, commit a little suicide. There's actually a song, by Elton John when I was growing up that I'd listened to about that.
Yeah.
It's very flippant, but it was like, I've always got an out,
Yeah.
But after seeing him laying there in the morgue and stuff, I realized, oh my gosh, I said, so this is painful to all the people who are left behind. So you're not doing a favor, you're not helping them out, and they're not better off without you.
Yeah.
And so I realized, well, I can't do that then. And so the self-medicating part became really serious then, where I just drank a lot.
Yeah.
Right? And prescription medication, different doctors, whatever I could get my hands on, basically. But and that came to a head at the after about a year, and I got pulled over on a DUI. And when I got pulled over, I was still in that mindset. It's like, you don't understand, you don't get me, you don't understand. And to the judge, and so he tried several things, and so there's a weekend in jail, another weekend in jail. Finally, he just got, it was a program they had. Finally, he just said, you're gone.
Yeah.
So I spent 60 days in jail, with some time served and stuff. So 60 days of I spent there. And that was an eye-opening experience. It was finally the moment where I got a chance to get away from all the medication stuff and actually get a chance to look at, wow, how did I get here? I've been up here.
Yeah.
And I got up there because, it was tough, I made good decisions and everything else, but so I realized that, having a choice is a big thing. And I think when most people hit that rock bottom and they finally realize that it's their choice,
Right.
You can keep doing what you're doing and keep ruining everybody's life and your life as well, or you can finally make a choice to do something about it. And that means you got to get rid of all the excuses.
Oh, wow.
The excuse, well, I'm like this because my son died of suicide. I'm like this because, I didn't win the Super Bowl, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Get rid of the excuses and just say, hey, you get to choose from now on how you want to be, right? So I made a choice to get answers. And that was when I got out, I started looking. And hit the University of Michigan Depression Center. I was actually at that small mirror, MIRA, Mental Illness Research Association at the time.
Yeah.
They had their gala, their evening deal, and Dr. Graydon from University of Michigan happened to be there and came up and gave me a card. And I looked at it, Dr. Graydon, psychiatrist, University of Michigan. So, so I kind of gave it some time, and I ended up calling him up, and then I ended up going to a program they had, did also get treatment. And then that's when the door was opened up for me, the education, the awareness of what depression is, the brain changes that happen, how it affects you. And that was, I dove in, everything I could get a hold of. And I just want to learn everything. And they ended up hiring me as an outreach coordinator and to build programs to hard-to-reach populations. One of those, of course, was, NFL players. And so we did a study on them. And came back, and about 15% of former players were moderately or severely depressed. Okay, so that's something.
Yeah.
But what I looked at, I saw all the raw data, and it was actually everybody. Every one of them had a really hard time with the transition going from this I highly identified person wearing a uniform in front of the fans and everything else to all of a sudden not being part of anything. And that drop-off was big. And so I thought, we got to do something about that. So we started building, peer-to-peer programs, how to do outreach. And that's about the time that, I started getting more involved with MIRA as well. This education program.
Yeah.
'Cause let me take some of this stuff, And so that's where that started. And and I think, at that point then, as we started doing that, I started learning more and getting there. So we met and then watched that over time and pulled it over. I realized that in order to make a difference, you can do something right in front of somebody if they're suicidal, right? So let's learn that. Let's take assist. Let's do QPR. Let's do yellow, whatever the program might be.
Lots of stuff.
There's a lot of it there, but I did QPR and also assist applied suicide enrichment skills training, right? So if I ever get in front of somebody that's suicidal, I'll know what to say. I won't be afraid of it. I'm not going to leave them. I can talk to them, and I can talk them out of it. Okay, I can. So that was like a really big thing for me. In fact, that was the first thing for me was then to go out and just talk about suicide prevention.
Right.
But as you know, you can't talk about suicide prevention. In fact, the chance of actually getting in front of somebody face to face like that when they're suicidal, active suicidal, is very rare.
Yep.
Okay. You're more likely to be talking to them when they're depressed or when something's happened and, or they're going through a transition or just maybe it's the very beginning where things haven't happened yet. But you can still do prevention because you're telling, giving them a way of education of these things to be aware of.
Yeah.
And so they can do something about it. They can have the choice before instead of waiting until after. Right. And so that's where my track went.
Yeah.
And as I got more studious into what was going on, it moved from that to more like in the middle to let's be upstream and let's go way upstream.
Yeah.
And where I'm kind of now really, and this is after having a program we built, after U of M, then it was a treatment center called, After the Impact. So we were doing stuff for former players, but also military, veterans that were going through the same type of transitions. To, I did 20 of the prisons, the line officers. So I did it in here in Michigan, done, police, first responders. So all those to me were like, the hard to reach population because a lot of it were guys, pretty much in that male dominant environment where you don't want to show weakness. And so, I learned that by being vulnerable, you can actually, get in there and make a difference because you still have the toughness, but you can also now, be somebody who can relate, and help somebody out. And what better teammate can you have than somebody who can relate to you, right? Yeah. And so that's kind of the whole track.
Well, I love that you're the same guy. Well, you're a little different now, obviously. That couldn't get out of bed back at Utah State, right?
Yeah.
And I consider you one of the most. Don't laugh too much. One of the guys that's the most intelligent person when it comes to talking about mental health, the brain. I mean, I bring you on the road with me, and I learn more every day from you. And I can't thank you enough for being part of our program. And bringing that, you bring your popularity to the program, obviously, because nowadays, you mentioned the Detroit Lions, and everybody wants to touch a lion. But you went on to get your honorary doctorate, which didn't shock me at all, that you're being recognized for all the hard work that you've done in this space of suicide prevention. And it's so interesting because I think you'd agree with me as people kind of, you bring up the word suicide prevention. Well, we don't want to talk about that. We want to talk just about, mental health. And it's like, if you're going to talk about anything that somebody can die from, then you have to talk about prevention, right? If I'm going to talk about the fact that people can die from colon cancer, then I got to go upstream and talk about like what can you do to prevent dying from this. So in the world of suicide prevention, working upstream, do you think more people are getting comfortable talking about that, or is it just that everybody and their brother is talking about mental health now? If you take
the totality of from of my knowledge from being 18, 20 years old, whatever it is, I don't care, to where it is today, it's changed dramatically.
Yeah.
Because you can actually talk about stuff, right? And you can hear people talk about it. I think there's still a generational gap thing, I will say, between younger people that can talk about it and they have social media and stuff, but they talk about it to where maybe the older generation, and I'll throw myself in there, right?
I'll be there.
Okay, which is
I'll be there in 3 years.
We want to control the conversation, Right. It's like no, if we're going to talk about that, we have to talk about it like this,
yeah.
Right? And I don't put us in that category because we're not that, but we're the age group. But we're talking like kids, right? We can talk about this all the time. And here's this and that. Well, did you know this? And we're in it, right? And so I think we're still coming together. But I think again, I'll just pat you on the back one more time. About the program is it's student oriented to where they get a chance to build what they need, right? Now we sit back and provide the professionalism around it, but also, here's some great tools to use, but you're going to use them. You're going to kind of help what you need, right? As opposed to having a program come in and land on them and saying, here's how you're going to do this. And they don't, yeah. The stages of change, right? You're gonna change your behavior. If you come to somebody too early and say, here's what you're gonna do, they'll draw a line and re-entrench and say, nope, we don't need that, right? And so it's gotta be theirs. They have to have some ownership in it. Just like somebody in recovery has to have some ownership in it. Otherwise, they're not gonna do it. It won't work. So That's what I like about the program.
So, Eric, you've been on the journey with us now of working with athletes. And on top of it all, so we do have our Be Nice Teams program, which is for athletes and athletic departments and high school athletic associations. And then we dabbled into that whole work environment. And I know that what was found during COVID was there were so many people struggling that when they looked at the data and looked back, that the majority of people had been struggling years before and had gone untreated. And now all of a sudden during COVID, things were surfacing, right? These things had always been there, but all of a sudden now the anxiety was coming out in a different way, or people struggling with depression. So, to the listeners today who may be owning companies, I'm just going to have you do a little plug about what we're doing within that adult group of people, because we know that middle-aged men, white in particular, hold the highest suicide rate. So how does the Be Nice Action Plan, which sometimes is labeled as a kids bully prevention program, how is that impactful in a work environment? And how can, again, people find a space to bring Be Nice into their businesses?
Well, before you get there, I want to touch on what happened when everything locked down.
Yeah.
Okay? Because in everybody's life, okay, there's transitions. We go through stuff. And if we don't quite understand it, maybe we can claw our way out by, looking at somebody else, okay, and we'll get through it because we might have some support around us. But, that's on an individual basis, everybody goes through that. However, when you take the whole country and everybody goes through it together at the same time, it becomes very, very real, really fast when you say, we have a mental health problem, okay, because all these things are rising up at the same time. And so they say, oh, it was COVID that caused all this.
Yeah.
No, it's being locked down and everybody has their own things, their issues.
Yeah.
They all came together and it happened at the same time. And so, so I just want to bring that up because that's no different for a company.
Right.
Like if you got a company where you work, you have the same conditions that are there, but it's not home. You go there, and so that means, you're all in the same environment. The thing is with businesses, everybody wants, the return on investment, so I'm going to hire you. That means you're going to do something that's going to bring more money into my organization. Otherwise, I'm not going to hire you. Okay, so that's typically the case. And so you come into the situation. So what is the ROI you're going to have? Well, let's look at Be Nice for a second. So now we got a plan that's going to come in. And what are we going to do? We're going to look at the totality of what you have. But we're going to take a little simple thing that says Be Nice, which, by the way, when you're talking about, your employee assistance, the culture,
exactly.
Right? You want people to be nice, right?
Yeah.
You want to be able to get along.
You want to be the company that's known for that.
Yeah, you want to take all the stuff where people argue and bit, all that kind of stuff out of it. And politics especially, right? You want to be nice, right? So there's a nice statement right there. But what happens in a business is you end up, when there's pressure on it, then you're going to find those pressure points. And so you're going to start getting, little microclimates, like in an area, like maybe it might start off in the back room or something where, and they start bitching about something and, so they start coming around. So it's not healthy. But it's really not to the full attention yet of the business because, things are still going along. But if things don't get better, that will spread. And all of a sudden, if you let it go, it is like a cancer and it'll spread.
Yeah.
It'll start bringing down. And all of a sudden you're looking at your business is not doing well. Like, how come we've got this huge absenteeism, How come we've got, people filing complaints or, why are we, production's up? What's going on? Why is this? And so you can start looking at, well, you can look at those things, those can be mental health issues and stuff. So let's get it back on the same page again and say, listen, let's put something in place where somebody does have an issue. Let's change the culture so that they can do something about it. And so we support that. That means we don't have to wait until it infects the whole business. We can start with the microcosm. And so if somebody, that sits across from me in a cubicle or in a workplace that's having an issue or something, I can get up and say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? And ask questions so I can, be nice.
Exactly.
And start off by noticing it. So what are you looking for? Somebody's not showing up to work. Somebody looks like they're hungover. So all these little things, because quite frankly, the best thing you can bring the picture, the best gift you can give to somebody, especially your partner or something, is your own mental health.
Yeah.
Because if I'm mentally healthy, and that means I can help you in your journey as well. And the same thing, if you're mentally healthy, then when I'm down, you can help me up. And so really the gift is to be that way. And so if you can get a culture that's that way, and everybody wants to be at a good place of work. You know, everybody wants out. You know, you want to be. I'll go back to like teamwork. Okay, so you want to be on a good team. You know, and that means to be in a good team, it has to have all the pieces to it. All right. So if I walk into the room and I'm responsible for my locker room area, but it looks all trashy and stuff, right? It looks sloppy. It looks like, man, I don't care. Okay, so, well, if he doesn't care, then why am I caring? And all of a sudden it starts falling apart. That's the cancer. But if I walk in and mine is really, really neat and kept, and I'm on time, and I'm doing this thing that I shouldn't be, and I'm, you know, conscious, and I'm giving my best effort like you should, right? And I see trash in the locker next to me, I can go pick it up too, because, you know, for me, I want to be on a good team. Well, that means I want to have a good area. And guess what? It makes sense to me to be on a good team. I got to make sure I got a good teammate. And so I'll start working there. And guess what? You know, that's the locker room. What about on the field? What about on a game? So if we're all doing the same thing, right? We're all working together because we all want the same thing, is to be on something good and right. Okay? Then we'll do it. That means I don't care. I'm not going to say, well, it's on his side. You know, well, I don't have to pick that up. If you want to be on the same, then do it, right?
I love it.
So, yeah, so for me, that's that piece you can inject into the culture of having a company. Everybody wants to have a good place of work. Everybody wants to make money. Nobody wants to get fired. Nobody wants to see you go downhill. You know, so we're all in that together.
I love it. And it's so, the thing I love the most about it is it's universal. It can be across the board. So if it's in a school, it's across the entire school. It's not just implanting it into a small group of individuals. So it's not just for, oh, we've got these kids that are just rough and they're, you know, they're a group that needs this program because they're in the responsible thinking center of the building, right? No, it's universal. It's across the board of other people that can maybe take those things that they're really good at and spread that out. And then you're learning from other people. What are they good? And I loved it.
So, dang it, I had the thought a second.
Come on, bring it on. Don't tell me. Not during the podcast. What is it?
I had to do, so we're talking about company-wise, right? So who is it good for? And I remember way back when we were doing, going to be talking on mental health. And so the school said, well, we'll have the students that need it. And I go, whoa, you're ostracizing those kids, right?
Right.
You're singling them out, and that's not good because that creates division as well.
Yep.
Right? So as a business, I went down and did in fact, I've done two of them. They're open pit coal mines, okay? So they've got like 150 employees. You know, they have 100 trucks that are working all the time. They nonstop, 24/7, you know, 365, they're working, right? And so they had 3 suicides in the previous 3 months. And so they brought me down to talk. But he didn't explain anything. You know, he didn't say, here, Mr. Hipple's going to come down and talk about mental health. It was their normal safety day. And he just had all the supervisors and everybody come into the room. And then he said, by the way, we're going to do something different today. We're going to talk about mental health. Here, Mr. Hipple, come on.
What is happening?
That was my intro. Right? He kind of snuck me in there, right?
Oh, great.
And of course, you know, when you do that, the first thing you see is everybody go, huh? And they all sit back with arms folded. So I knew it was going to be a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
I played football, so I got a little bit, because out of 100 guys, there's only 2 women, right?
Yeah.
And they were in the administration. So the first thing I said to him, I said, we're going to talk about this, but maybe it doesn't apply to you. I don't know. Do you have kids? And, you know, all but maybe 1 or 2 raised their hands. Yeah, we've got kids, different ages. Okay, cool. Because what I'm going to talk to you about will really help them out. You know, and so what parent isn't concerned about their kids?
Absolutely.
And so they all started leaning forward. And by the time the 3-hour thing was over with, they were up doing the exercises and they're doing else because they realized, oh, stigma-wise, not good for me, but I want to learn this so I can teach my kid.
Yeah.
You know, so it's amazing. And so there's different ways to press it.
I love it. Yeah. It is. And, you know, a lot of the industries that we're going into are, you know, 95% guys. And we're talking to the manufacturing, you know, a lot of manufacturing companies here in West Michigan. But you are right on. You just got to approach it in a different way. And, you know, oftentimes the most underutilized benefit that employees have is an employee assistance program. So employers are paying for this great benefit, but people don't even know what it is or why they should use it, which I love being that advertisement for those benefits also.
I was going to say something about sports. And in fact, here's how Stigma works.
Yeah.
When you and I first started talking, I'll be nice, when I started following you, you know, there was a part of me that didn't jump in, you know, early.
Right.
Because I'm thinking, okay, how am I going to sell this, to the sporting world?
Yeah.
How am I going to do that, right? Because, be nice. Oh, come on, we're going to be like this. If I'm wearing a shirt that says be nice,
yeah.
I said, I even was hung up on that to start off with, but then it didn't take too long before we got in front of the, Michigan High School Athletic Association.
You got it.
And guess what? You know what? It works for athletes too, because,
does.
You can talk about off the field, but what better way can you be a best teammate than if you're taking care of your mental health? And I'm there for him.
I know. And the story that you talked about, all these injuries that were happening in that, 1989, 88, those all did have an impact on your mental health. And, all of a sudden your play begins to go down, or you can't even participate in the sport. That was the key to who you are. And especially for high school kids, when they have an injury or when they don't make a team that they've been playing on their whole entire life, AAU, that whole journey, it's fair for parents to have this information of what to look for in your son, your daughter, and those changes in mental health. And then going off to college, we've got another huge population too. And it's such a hard, that's a real hard demographic for us to be nice into on college campuses. And right now I know that you were with us when we went and launched at Southwest Minnesota State University, where they recognize that Be Nice, again, it's not just about wearing this brand logo, Be Nice, but it was more about across the board, a culture of change and recognizing each other, that teammate, where they're doing great and where there might be something different, and that could be something with their mental health. So our journey is going to keep going. And I'm going to do another episode with you coming up, because I think this was just so fun and free-flowing.
Is that time already?
What time is it? But anyway, I want to thank you so much for being on our journey. I never in my life would have thought that one of my best friends is an alumni of the Detroit Lions. And when I mention your name, everybody freaks out. And they're like, where is he? I'm like, well, he's going to stay at my house, which I still have to have you up to Manistee pretty soon. To stay with Tim and I up north. But
before you sign off, I do want to say this, because, for a long time, and like I said before, I actually jumped in to Be Nice. Even before that, where I was actually doing, the one-on-ones, the groups, small groups here, athlete, whatever it was. When I was doing that, I was actually doing the Be Nice plan.
I know.
I just didn't have a name for it.
I know.
And so the reason I resonated so well with it, when I finally got it, I go, this is it. This is this I was talking about. Especially the empowerment piece. I love it.
Yeah.
Right? And we can talk about that again another time.
I know.
But because that's really the thing that can pull you out of it. And too often we're worried about conditions, that society puts on us, or we put on, and I got to be perfect. I got to be this. How do you do that? Well, you don't worry about it, but you're empowered. Okay.
Amen.
So that means it just happens, right? Anyway.
I know. I live it. I hear it all the time. I sit in church and I'll hear it resonate through the homily, the sermon that day. I'll be like, that must be nice that you just said. But anyway, I want to thank you so much. If today's episode that you were listening to resonated a message for you, share it with someone else. But always remember that there is help out there. Eric and I have free-flowing conversations about this all the time. But if you or your loved one is ever struggling with a mental health disorder, or you're in a crisis situation, make sure you use the crisis hotline, which is 988, 3 numbers, or the text line 741-741. For more information about Be Nice, how to bring Be Nice into your school, your business, your community, please, benice.org. And on a final note, make it a great day. Change, improve, and save lives. Be nice.
This podcast is made possible in part by the Kent County Medical Society Alliance.